All right, good morning. Welcome to Hungry Sheep Podcast. We are going to be continuing into Revelation 6, but there is a lot of kind of preliminary discussion that I feel like I need to go into because if you come to the text, a lot of people are going to come at it from different angles, different presuppositions. Eschatology is really built on all of your theology. It's really built up on the breadth of your theology. What I really want to discuss in this episode is just to show and try to prove the connection between Ezekiel and Revelation. That's my main goal for today. So I'm going to try to go through some connections. Now, what we're looking at as far as the text, if you go over to Revelation chapter 6, we're looking at the time right around this, the white horse. Revelation chapter 6, the white horse. And I'll go ahead and read that part right now. Verse 1, it says, "And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard as it were the noise of thunder, one of the four beasts saying, Come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer." Okay, so we know this white horse brings in peace, because the second seal is the red horse that takes peace from the earth. So the first horse, the white horse, he basically comes and conquers, but he conquers in an interesting way because it's not a conquering of bloodshed. And I went into that last time and started to talk about what I think that is. So if you haven't listened to the previous episode on Revelation 6, the first part, I would listen to that or you may be lost here. Now, before going on to the rest of the seals here, I want to try to establish a connection. And this is going to be partly review. You're going to hear some things that were mentioned last time, but a lot of new things as well. So I want to establish a connection between Revelation and what we're about to see, starting here with the seals, and then Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel, because they're very much parallel. Now, how are they parallel? If you look at Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 26 through 28, you're going to see that Ezekiel has a vision of a throne, right? And this is a vision of the pre-incarnate Christ. That corresponds directly with Revelation chapters 4 through 5, where John is taken up into the throne room of God. The imagery is the same. He sees a man on the throne. You can compare Ezekiel 1:26 with Revelation 4:2. There's a rainbow around the throne. If you look at Ezekiel 1:28, you see the same thing over in Revelation. A double-sided scroll is opened. You can see that in Ezekiel chapter 2, verses 9 through 10. And we were discussing that, Revelation 5, verses 1 and verse 4. And just to note, Ezekiel actually says that regarding that scroll, there was written therein lamentations and mourning and woe. Whereas in Revelation, as the Lamb opens that scroll, seal by seal, various judgments are poured out on the earth. And so then you go forward in Ezekiel, and that he foretells plagues that are going to come on apostate Jerusalem. He's told there's going to be a siege of Jerusalem over in chapter 4, verse 7. He talks if you look at Ezekiel 4, 9 through 17, he talks about scarcity, defilement, as the Israelites are sent into captivity among the heathen nations, among the Gentiles. And he says specifically a third part will be destroyed in the siege. That's Ezekiel 5, verse 2. You can compare that with Ezekiel 5, verse 12. It says, "A third part of thee shall die with the pestilence and with the famine. Shall they be consumed in the midst of thee." And then, so that's the third part. But then another third part, he says in verse 12, "A third part shall fall by the sword round about thee." So they're going to be outside, and they're going to fall. And then, same verse again, Ezekiel 5:12, "And I will scatter a third part into all the winds, and I will drive out a sword after them." If you compare that in chapter 5 over to chapter 6, verse 12, still same continuing context, he says, "He that is far off shall die of the pestilence, and he that is near shall fall by the sword. He that remaineth and is besieged shall die by the famine. Thus will I accomplish my fury upon them." Now remember, this is talking about judgment of God's people, Jerusalem. Then if we go forward a little bit to Ezekiel chapter 8, verses 1 through 3, we read this. "And it came to pass in the 6th year, in the 6th month, in the 5th day of the month, By the way, I thought that was really interesting because you immediately think 666 because the 6th year, the 6th month, but then it says the 5th day. It's almost like indicating something's going to happen the next day. But anyway, as I sat in my house and the elders of Judah sat before me, that the hand of the Lord God fell there upon me. Then I beheld, and lo, a likeness as the appearance of fire, from the appearance of his loins downward fire, and from his loins upward as the appearance of brightness, as the color of amber. So this looks like the description of Christ in Revelation, and Daniel says, he put forth the form of a hand and took me by the lock of mine head, and the Spirit lifted me up between earth and heaven, and brought me in the visions of God to Jerusalem, to the door of the inner gate that looketh toward the north, where was the seat of the image of jealousy, which provoketh to jealousy. Again, just a note here, he brought me in the visions of God. That goes back to chapter 1. Remember chapter 1, the thronal vision there at the end. He says this was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. So it was a similitude. It was a likeness. It wasn't reality. It was a figure. That's what Ezekiel is getting us to understand. These are figures. This is not to be taken literally. So we're not taking the Bible literally if we don't take Ezekiel literally when he tells us that these things are likenesses. So here he goes to Jerusalem, and he goes to that inner gate that looks north. Now, north is always in the Bible where the judgment comes from. The Babylonians, they come from the north, right? But it says there was the seat, there was the seat of the image of jealousy. I thought it was very interesting that it has a seat. It provokes to jealousy. Now, if you compare, okay, stopping right there, if you compare Revelation chapter 6, remember that the 6 seals we see are various woes being poured out. And we have seen that those 6 seals of Revelation 6 correspond to Jesus' words in Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse. Remember in Matthew 24:21, Jesus says, "For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor shall ever be." That's got to be the great tribulation, starting at Matthew 24:21. It says there was not a greater tribulation since the beginning of the world, and nor shall ever be. That's got to be the great tribulation. And it describes it there. You go down to verse 29, look what it says, verse 29. Matthew 24:29. It says, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the 4 winds, from one end of heaven to the other." Now note those 5 signs in verse 29. The sun is darkened, the moon's darkened, stars fall from heaven, the powers of the heavens are shaken, the sign of the Son of Man appears, right? Now we compared those with the opening of the 6th seal, Revelation 6:12 through 17. You're going to see that 6th seal opened, and it matches up. It says, "And I beheld when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair." There's the sun being darkened. The moon became as blood. There's the moon losing its light. The stars of heaven falling unto the earth. There's the stars falling. "Even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind." And then it says, "And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman and every freeman hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand?" So clearly, they all are seeing, right? They're all seeing the Lamb, okay? The one that sits on the throne. And we've seen the throne vision, who's sitting on the throne. And the signs there in Revelation 6:12 through 17 directly match those in Matthew 24, verses 29 through 31. Why is that important? Because Jesus says these signs will occur, according to Matthew 24:29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the great tribulation, as you saw back in Matthew 24:21. So that seems to imply that the 6 seals are the woes of the great tribulation. But we look back at Matthew 24 and we notice something that directly precedes that time of great tribulation. If you go back to Matthew 24, and we looked back at Matthew 24:15, it says, "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand." And then it talks about basically flee the city, get out of there. Okay, what is the abomination of desolation? All right, I want to go a little bit more deeper into this. The abomination of desolation. In Daniel 8, we see the little horn described. Daniel 8, verse 9, it says, "This little horn, he's a world leader. He waxed exceeding great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land." And look at verse 10. It says, "The little horn waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them." Verse 11, "He magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down." All right, so where did this little horn come from? Okay, where did the little horn come from? And this is Antichrist. We talked about that last time. Where did the little horn come from? He came from the previous chapter, Daniel 7, when Daniel has the vision of the four beasts. You can look at Daniel 7, verses 2 through 7. I'm going to read those. It says, "Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Okay, so these 4 beasts, okay, there's first a lion, and then there's a bear, and then there's a leopard, and then there's this terrible, dreadful beast, and they all come up out of the sea, which is representative of the peoples of the earth. They arise out of the earth. And so we need to understand, because the little horn is going to come out of these beasts, so we need to understand what these beasts are. But we don't really need to guess, because throughout the book of Daniel, it shows us what the beasts are. If you go to Daniel 7:15, a little later in that same chapter, look what it says. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me know the interpretation of the things. These great beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom, and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from all others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things. So this is the little horn. The little horn is appearing here. He's coming out of that 4th beast. So the little horn has eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came. And judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, The 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first. And he shall subdue 3 kings, and he shall speak great words against the Most High. This is talking about that little horn, the Antichrist. He shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand. So it says the saints shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominion shall serve and obey him. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. All right, what are the four beasts? The four beasts correspond to Nebuchadnezzar's dream. You remember Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel? If you go over there. So you go to Daniel chapter 2, and Daniel is interpreting Nebuchadnezzar's dream. He says, Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. Okay, and he has this image of a man. It says, This image's head was of fine gold, his breasts and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, and his feet part iron and part of clay. And then he says, Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them in pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, the gold, broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the earth. So the interpretation here, he says, verse 37, he says, Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And he says in verse 38, Thou art the head of gold. So Babylon is the head of gold. Okay, Babylon's the first. It's the head of gold. It says, After this shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. And we know what came next, Medo-Persia. Okay, but it says, And another third kingdom of brass, right, which shall bear rule over the earth. And we know that's Greece, because after Medo-Persia came Greece. Babylon, Medo-Persia, and then Greece. And it says, Then the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things. And as iron that breaketh in pieces, it shall break in pieces and bruise. Okay, that is Rome. We know that Rome came after Greece. And it says of this final kingdom, okay, it talks about Daniel 2:41, Thou sawest the feet, the toes, and it said, Part of potter's clay, part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much as thou saw the iron mixed with the clay. And it says, As the toes of the feet were part of iron, part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And it says, Whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And it says, In the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. All right, now let me just say about that fourth beast, Rome. Okay, it's Rome. That's the dreadful, terrible beast. And it is a kingdom of kingdoms, because symbolized by the 10 toes. There's 10 toes, each one symbolizing kings. If you go back to the vision of the beasts, okay, they correspond to this vision of Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2. So Daniel 7, the vision of the four beasts coming out of the water. The first beast, a lion, that's Babylon. The second beast coming up, the bear, Medo-Persia. The third beast coming up, the leopard, that's Greece. And then there's this fourth dreadful beast. Okay, and the dreadful beast has 10 horns, just like the statue dream. The statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream had 10 toes. Okay, it's a kingdom composed of sub-kingdoms. It's like a union, a great union of kingdoms. Okay, and it's described, it's under Rome. Okay, all right, now let's go back. Okay, so let's go back and talk about this. Out of this great kind of conglomeration of United Nations comes this little horn. Okay, the little horn. And by the way, that same fourth beast, just so you know, it shows up again in Revelation 13. Yep, Revelation 13, the passage where we see the Antichrist, how he makes war with the saints. Remember, it talks about the little horn comes out of that beast. It wars against the saints. Well, it matches Revelation 13. In fact, I'll read Revelation 13, 5 through 9. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, talking about Antichrist. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life, of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. All right, that pretty well matches the descriptions of the little horn back in Daniel 7, which comes out of that same 10-horned beast, the 10-horned beast, which we realize is Rome. So in Daniel 7:20, you think about this little horn, okay? He's a king, a leader, world leader who comes out of that conglomerate of nations. He says he has a mouth that spake very great things, Daniel 7:20. So he's a big mouth, speaks very great things. And in verse 20, he said, whose look was more stout than his fellows. That word stout actually it's often translated great, associated with power. He looks intimidating. And then in verse 21, the same horn, it says, made war with the saints and prevailed against them. Okay? And then verse 22, it says, until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. That matches the idea is the saints are given into the hand of the Antichrist. He makes war and he prevails against them. Notice that verse 24, Daniel 7:24 says that this Antichrist will subdue 3 kings out of this kind of conglomerate of nations. He'll subdue 3 kings. And then in verse 25, he shall speak great words against the Most High. Okay, blasphemous words against God. And shall wear out the saints of the Most High. And think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and dividing of time. So he's going to try to change times and laws. He's changing things, right? He's drastically trying to change things. And you go into Daniel 8, you get more information. In verse 9, Daniel 8, verse 9, he waxes exceeding great toward the south, toward the east, toward the pleasant land. So he's expanding his power. Verse 10, he waxes great even to the host of heaven, and cast down some of the host and the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. In verse 11, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Now, this is where you see that he's the Antichrist. He magnifies himself to the prince of the host. Okay? Not going to go into the background study of the symbology here. The host of heaven, he waxed great even to the host of heaven. I'm trying to give you a concise idea of the saints being pictured as stars. So Abraham looks up in Genesis 15, and God says, so shall thy seed be. He pictures all the saints of all the ages as stars, as innumerable stars. Also in this very book, it says, those who turn many to righteousness shall shine, right? Like the brightness of the firmament or the brightness of the stars forever. There is another passage where the saints are referred to as stars, and it's over in, let's see. So in Revelation 1:16, Jesus has in his right hand 7 stars. All right, 7 stars, sources of light. And then in Revelation 20, it talks about the mystery of the 7 stars, which were seen in his right hand, and the 7 golden candlesticks. It says the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, or the messengers, same word, angelos, it can mean messenger or angel. Messengers of the 7 churches, and the 7 candlesticks, which thou sawest, are the 7 churches. So the stars, okay, the stars are the kind of basically the leaders of the churches, right? And if you go back to keeping that symbolism, apocalyptic symbolism in mind, it says he waxed great even to the host of heaven, and cast down some of the host of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Okay? So remember, he's making war, right? He's wearing out the saints. Verse 25 of Daniel 7 there. He's wearing out the saints. And he magnifies himself. He's casting down some, it seems to be church leaders. And it says he magnifies himself even to the prince of the host. What host? Talks about the stars of the host. The prince of the host. So he's magnifying himself over the church of Jesus Christ. And it says, by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Notice, the Antichrist is said to take away the daily sacrifice. And it says in verse 12, the next verse, a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. What does that mean, a host? Talking about people that from the previous verses are associated with the worship of God. And they are transgressing, okay? There's a multitude of people that are apparently supposed to be part of the worship of God, but they join him by reason of transgression. They join with Antichrist. And because of that, all right, the daily sacrifice is taken away, okay? The host is given him against the daily sacrifice. They turn against the daily sacrifice. They cast down the truth. See it? In verse 12, they cast down the truth to the ground. So this is something happens here that's very anti-gospel, and it practiced and prospered. Something is very anti-gospel the Antichrist is doing here, and he's deceiving masses of people, and some church leaders have even been cast down by him. And verse 10, he's stamped upon them. And we get more detail in Daniel 11, where the little horn is called the vile person. Daniel 11:21, it says, "In his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom." So apparently he's not honored like a world leader would typically be honored, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. He's a big mouth. He's a big talker, right? He's like the false teachers who speak great swelling words and promises, and so flattery, a form of lying. He's a liar, but he deceives a lot of people. And in Daniel 11:30, listen to this passage. Daniel 11:30 through 39 gives us a lot more detail to zoom in on what happened here with this betrayal. It says, "For the ships of Chittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant." It's the key words here. He's mad. He's angry at the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. He's got an unholy alliance here with some who are professing to be Christians, but they've forsaken the gospel. "And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength." So he's by force going to pollute the worship of God. He says, "And shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate." There's the abomination of desolation. "And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flattery." See, he's flattering these who are corrupted. "But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. They that understand among the people shall instruct many. Yet they shall fall by the sword and by flame and by captivity and by spoil many days." Remember, 42 months, right? "Now when they shall fall, they shall be helped with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them and to purge them and make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed." So apparently this is a really rough time for the true church. It's a time of tribulation. "And the king shall do according to his will. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished." So it says he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. And he says, "For that is determined shall be done. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all." So he's just magnifying himself. It says he won't regard any god. He's God. He's not lifting up another god. He is making himself God. "But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not." He's not exalting the God of forces above himself, but he does honor the God of forces. It sounds like military power. "And a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold, silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain." All right, so circling back around, what is the abomination of desolation, which according to Jesus in Matthew 24, verse 15, it directly precedes this great tribulation that comes later on in Matthew 21 through 29. We already talked about that. What is that abomination of desolation? It is a corruption of the true worship of God, led by the Antichrist, the little horn, who is aided by what seems to be blind professing Christians who have betrayed the gospel and betrayed Christ, like Judas's. It doesn't say that Antichrist is going to set up this abomination. It says they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate, meaning who? Those traitors, the Judas's, the ones who betrayed the gospel. They're going to place the abomination that maketh desolate, that brings desolation, that brings judgment from God. What is that abomination? It seems to be the Antichrist himself. 2 Thessalonians 2, 3 through 4, parallel passage about the Antichrist. It says, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first." Okay? and that the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that, here it is, ready? So that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Okay, so it seems that he himself, maybe I could be wrong here, but it seems that he himself is lifted up. It's the worship of man. It's the worship of a man. Apparently he's a flatterer. He's a smooth talker. He's exalted. People really like this guy. He's boastful. He magnifies himself. He's super great. He's awesome. Everybody loves him. And there's traitors in the church who help to lift this guy up and put him into power, not only secularly, but even over the church. He sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And so with all that in mind, you go back to Ezekiel 8 now. Remember, just getting everything in context, what we've seen in Ezekiel. Just like Revelation, you start Ezekiel with a throne vision, right? Chapter 1, man on the throne, rainbow around the throne. A double-sided scroll is opened in chapter 2, corresponding to Revelation 5. Then chapters 4 through 6 of Ezekiel, Ezekiel foretells the plagues that are coming upon apostate Jerusalem. But we're trying to ask the question, what triggers the beginning of these plagues on Jerusalem, on God's people, this time of tribulation? And chapter 8 tells us, look at verse 3, Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 3, it says, the Spirit lifted me up between the earth and heaven, brought me in the visions of God to Jerusalem, to the door of the inner gate that looketh toward the north, where was the seat of the image of jealousy, which provoketh to jealousy. That this image of jealousy may very well correspond to the worship of Antichrist. And it seems that the Antichrist deceives the apostate church. He promises them to give them what they want, something of a worldly nature. So they're corrupting the gospel. He corrupts them by flatteries. It seems that treacherous Christian leaders are helping to promote him and gain, so that he can gain the worshipful allegiance of the professing church. And this is all happening like on a world stage. Incredible. There's other abominations also coinciding with this image, the image of jealousy. If you look at Ezekiel 8, secret sins, it talks about the chambers of their imagery, seems to symbolize the imagination of the hearts, all kinds of wicked idolatry in the hearts and minds of God's people. Women involved in pagan worship, you see there later on in chapter 8 of Ezekiel. Men turning their backs on God and worshiping created things. And then finishing off the chapter, also violence is mentioned. So those seem to be the marks of the apostate church that are going to follow Antichrist. And, it's deception, right? It's deception. And you look at the parallel. Look at the New Testament, 2 Thessalonians 2, 8 through 12. This is the passage about the Antichrist. It says, then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish. And here it is, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So think about this. Ezekiel 8 is all about abominations, and Ezekiel 9 marks the beginning of these coming desolations, right? Destruction coming. So going into chapter 9, okay, chapter 8, abomination. Chapter 9 is looking forward to these coming desolations. So we go to chapter 9 now. Ezekiel 9. He cried also in mine ears with a loud voice, saying, cause them that have charge over the city to draw near, even every man with his destroying weapon in his hand. And behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, which lieth toward the north. Remember, judgment comes from the north. It's interesting that there's 6 men coming from the north. And every man had a slaughter weapon in his hand. And one man among them was clothed with linen. He was clothed with linen, with a writer's inkhorn by his side. And they went in and stood beside the brazen altar. And the glory of the God of Israel was gone up from the cherub, whereupon he was, to the threshold of the house. This is where the glory of God starts to depart as judgment comes. It says, he called to the man clothed with linen, which had the writer's inkhorn by his side. And the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that are done in the midst thereof. And to the others he said in mine hearing, go ye after him through the city, and smite. Let not your eye spare, neither have ye pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women. But come not near any man upon whom is the mark. And begin at my sanctuary. That's important. Judgment begins with the house of God. Remember, this is the judgment of Jerusalem. This is Judgment that starts with God's people first. Okay, that's how it works in Isaiah. That's how it works in the other books. Judgment always begins with God's people, and then it goes outward to the world. And it says, they began at the ancient men which were before the house. And he said unto them, defile the house, fill the courts with the slain, go ye forth. And they went forth and slew in the city. Your judgment seems to begin not only at the house of God, but with leaders who have really turned against God and been unfaithful. The blind, unfaithful shepherds is the idea. And you see that the prophecies against the shepherds later in Ezekiel 34, if you want to go over there and read that. But notice here there's a remnant that's marked to be preserved, and it's the men that sigh and cry for all the abominations that are done in the midst of Jerusalem. These are the ones, all right, the ones who are preserved. They see the false worship going on. They understand how blasphemous it is, and they mourn over it. And it's interesting, during this time of purging, cleansing, judgment of the house of God, judgment of the sanctuary, judgment of God's people, you'll see more of a description back in Daniel 11:32 through 35. It says there, and such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he, the Antichrist, corrupt by flattery, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits, and they that understand among the people. So there's those that understand, right? They shall instruct many. And yet, but it says, yet they, this is the people, okay, really it's talking about the judgment beginning with the professing church. It says, they shall fall by the sword and by flame and by captivity and by spoil many days. Under the Antichrist, he's wearing out the saints, he's fighting against the saints. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure of all the details, but I just want to focus on this part here. Let me read. Now, when they shall fall, they shall be helped with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. Okay, this is the verse I want to get to. And some of them of understanding shall fall. Okay? It says, to try them and to purge them and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. It's not going to be a time, this time of judgment. It's even for those who understand, it's going to be a hard time. It's going to be a time of, even if they're not killed, which we know, many are going to be killed by Antichrist. Even those who understand, they're going to be tested. They're going to be purified during this time until the time of the end. And we can look back to the letters to the churches, right? That'll give you some clarity. God looks upon the churches, the messengers of the churches. He sends these letters to Ephesus, to Sardis, right? And God knows the condition of the various churches, and that really does have an important impact on how they experience the judgment. So now, just because the church is pure doesn't mean they're not going to suffer. We know that the church of Smyrna there was nothing said against that church, and yet he says to them they're going to have tribulation 10 days. Some of them are going to be put into prison and so forth. So there's going to be, even the true people of God, all right, just looking at the earth during this time under Antichrist, you could say, well, is God judging that church or those people over there? They're being thrown in prison. They're suffering. Some of them are being beheaded, whatever. You could say, oh, this is God's wrath against them. A lot of that is there's going to be martyrs, and those who survive, there's going to be those who are being tested like Job and purified, right? Job said he was being purified. He would come forth as gold. Remember that from the book of Job. So you have that element there. So this is mostly like a time under Antichrist where it's like a big test. It's like a test for the church. Are they going to fall for the flattering and betray the gospel and become worldly, go after worldly things and follow Antichrist as he sets himself up over as an authority over professing Christianity? Or are they going to be faithful? Are they going to be faithful to Christ and face the wrath of this guy who is going to really turn against, at least he's going to turn against the true church of Jesus Christ. He's going to turn against the true church, and it says they're going to be given into his hand. If you go to Revelation 6 to the 5th seal, you see the martyrs there, implying that many had in fact been murdered for their faith during this time of tribulation. In verse 9 of chapter 6, when he had opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God, for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled. So this is a time when true saints are being martyred. And that's why I said, you see in Revelation 7, starting verse 9, you see an innumerable multitude coming out from the tribulation, out from great tribulation. It says in Revelation 7:9, after this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands, and cried with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our God, which sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb. And all the angels stood round about the throne and about the elders and four beasts, and fell before the throne on their faces, and worshipped God, saying, Amen, blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be unto our God forever and ever. Amen. And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, What are these which are arrayed in white robes, and whence came they? Remember, this is an innumerable multitude from all nations. And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. And he said to me, These are they which came out of great tribulation, and have washed their robes, and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him. They serve him day and night in his temple. And he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb, which is in the midst of the throne, shall feed them, and shall lead them unto fountains of waters. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. So you see that they've come out of great tribulation. So being that we saw that, if I'm getting this right, the interpretation of comparing Matthew 24 verses 21 through 29, comparing that with Revelation 6. If I'm getting this right, and they correspond, describing the same season, which is the Great Tribulation, it makes perfect sense that the very next chapter, Revelation chapter 7, you would see this innumerable multitude that come out of that Great Tribulation. These are people, it seems, most of them, or many of them, I don't know, have actually been martyred. They've been martyred under the Antichrist because they held fast the word. And so that's what I'm saying. I'm saying I think that the white horse here at the beginning, I think this corresponds with the Antichrist, who comes in by flatteries. So it would represent the whole spirit of Antichrist deceiving the world, conquering the world, and that he expands and he's conquering land after land. He takes down these other three world leaders in this global conglomerate that he's part of, the little horn, and he exalts himself over the church, and he has traitors that join him to corrupt the true worship, the true gospel, and then he persecutes the true saints who hold the word of God and won't worship him. And apparently it's a pretty tough time. There's a lot of pressure, extreme amount of pressure, because if you go forward to look at the passage there in Revelation 13, it talks about if you go to verse 5, it talks about there's 42 months. He blasphemes God in verse 6, and he makes war with the saints in verse 7, and it says he overcomes them. And he has power over all kindreds, tongues, nations. All that dwell on the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Everybody's going to worship this guy. Everybody, except for those who are of the true faith of God, who know their God, who have understanding. And then you get to this other beast, Revelation 13:11. Beast comes out of the earth, two horns like a lamb. He speaks as a dragon. He has the same power as the first beast, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. It says he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven and the earth in the sight of men. And it says he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. This is reminiscent of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, would not bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's idol. And most others did, by the way, most others did. It says, he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark on their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Herein is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. 666. So apparently it's a worldwide deception. There's extreme amount of pressure, and if you don't worship the beast or the image of the beast or take his number, his sign, you're slain. You're put to death. That's what it comes down to. Severe persecution. All right, that's all for today. Thanks for listening, and I'm going to move forward into chapter 6. I just wanted to show how Ezekiel really parallels with Revelation. I think there's a lot more here as we dig in. I encourage you to just dig in and seek more information, seek more connections. And if you'd like to email me, you can email me any questions or discussion. You just go on the BayRidgeBaptistNYC.com, and there's a contact button there. All right, God bless you. Have a great day.